Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and I'm here today to bring you another review of the fourth shoe in the ASICS Blast series. So let's get into it. Here I have the Sonicblast. I have already reviewed the Mega Blast. If you have not seen that yet, go ahead and check that out and see what my thoughts were. The first difference I want to call out is this is actually the only plated shoe out of those four, okay? So the four being the Mega Blast, Sonicblast, which is what we're talking about today, and the Nova Blast and Super Blast, okay? So the plate here is their Astro plate, and this is made of Pebax. So think of that as kind of a type of plastic, I guess, for simplicity's sake here. So this is not a carbon plated shoe. I am going to probably compare this to Saucony Endorphin Speeds. Now there are some key differences I do want to call out that I think I am going to notice with this that will make me like these more. If you've heard me talk about it before, the speeds were an issue for me, and the Speed 4 in particular. I didn't love the 5. The 4s were just a little bit too firm. Now, I felt like the plate did its part. It performed very well, but I was noticing foot pain as I went on miles and miles. So I'm hoping that with some of the technology within the foams here, and however this Pebax material plate performs, that we have some of that resolved. The Pebax plate is going to be a little bit more flexible than a carbon plate. So the carbon plate's really stiff. So generally speaking, plastic plates just give a little bit more of that flexibility, but still giving you some of that propulsion that you're looking for in a faster shoe. This is meant for everyday running or more of those tempo paces. So this is a shoe that you can take out and do some short runs, long runs, everything in between. I'm going to hopefully take it out for about 5 miles today so that I get to take it through all my different paces and speak to how this performs best. This does technically have maximum cushioning within the shoe. Looking at this compared to the Mega Blast, I do see there's quite a bit of foam overall, but it doesn't seem to be intimidating. I felt like with the Mega Blast, I was kind of walking on stilts, but I feel like this has a good amount of foam. So hopefully it plays the part in giving me some of that bounce. This whole line is meant for bounce. It is considered to be more of a firm ride. Now with the maximum cushioning firm ride, you might ask, well, how does that make sense? It's maximum cushioning, but so you shouldn't be able to feel any of that striking, right? Now the maximum cushioning is going to help with a lot of that shock absorption when you're running so that you don't take the brunt of that throughout your leg. The firm ride part of this is going to be more of that propulsion effect. So you're going to get the benefits of having that cushioning. You'll be able to still move and go and pick up the pace. Kind of the best of both worlds. I guess also something to call out with this is that it is not that squishy feeling when we're talking cushioning. Now it can be, but having that firmness is like showcasing that yes, you get the benefits and the feeling of comfort from the foam, but you're not having that sinking in feeling. The foam is helping propel you forward. The foam composition here is that new FF Turbo Squared combined with the FF Blast Max foam. Try and say that 3 times fast because I've already messed that up like 5 times. That is what is actually in the Nova Blast shoe. And then this Turbo Squared foam is that newer foam technology that they have in this one and the Mega Blast. I found it to be pretty firm in the Mega Blast overall and not as cushiony as it had described itself to be. With this combination of the two, I think what I'm anticipating is you're still gonna get that propulsion obviously with the plate and then having that foam technology, but I think we're gonna get a little bit more forgiveness in terms of the comfort here, which is what I am hoping for. I don't want the sinking in, but I don't want to feel so much of the ground and impact, which I kind of did have in the Mega Blast, which really I shouldn't have given the technologies that were in that shoe. Shoe comes in 3 different colorways, 3 for men, 3 for women. There's only one overlapping colorway, and that's the white version of this shoe. I personally don't love any of the colors. I have spoken of this before. I like a neutral shoe. I did opt for the black version here, and the black does have some kind of fun little neon-y yellowish green colors in there. You can see, and it complements with the plate. Not a unisex shoe, weighing in for a men's 9 at 9 ounces and a women's 8 at 7.9 ounces. Now this is a heavier shoe overall. When I am holding this, it doesn't feel terribly heavy. Again, 7.9 is not substantially different than something in the upper 6s, but every ounce does make a difference depending on what you're using this for. Now, if I wanted to use this for a race day, it may be a little too heavy for my personal preference. Once I get into it, I'll see if I actually can notice that heaviness, but I think that was my biggest issue with these Super Blasts was that they were just too heavy for me. Again, not the heaviest shoe on the market, but it was just a little bit too much bulk in the back end, and then also just the weight. I noticed that as I was moving. It just was holding me back a little, and I didn't feel like I could, sure, could I take on some easy runs, long distance runs, of course, but I always like something to be a little lighter weight, so I have the flexibility and option to pick up the pace if I want to. There is an 8mm heel to toe drop, which is pretty standard. I like something between that 6 and 8 range. Price point, this comes in at $180 US. As I run in this, I want to compare it to that Saucony Endorphin Speed line of shoe. Now, again, I will probably focus on the 4s since that's where I have the most experience. I have a little bit of experience in the 5s, just didn't really like those as much. But price point in comparison to that, it's $5 more. And for a plated shoe, that's pretty good, I would say overall. It's not a carbon plated shoe, so I don't anticipate it being in that $225, $250 price point range that a lot of those super shoes are. I don't know that we would call this a super shoe. I think it's still like one of those in-between shoes, which really this whole Blast series, I feel like they're all kind of in that middle ground, no man's land for super shoes where they're all exhibiting a lot of characteristics of a super shoe, but they're not all quite checking all of the boxes for that. A little about the upper here. So this is a mesh upper. This does feel a little bit thicker maybe than the Mega Blast that I tried recently, but still seems like it's going to be very, very flexible, breathable. I think it's going to mold to my foot very well. I don't feel like I'm going to have issues with temperature while I'm running. The heel, I'm a little concerned with this because the heel structure does not seem to be very stable. There's a lot of flexibility here. I can squeeze this all the way in, and I don't think I'll have any concerns in terms of rubbing, blistering. Obviously, that's one of the big things I look for, but I think that there's going to be lacking in some stability here. Now, what I think would be helpful for a shoe like this, and I may just try this out of the gate so that I don't even have to worry about any potential issues as I get going, is doing that heel lock here. So utilizing that last hole and essentially like providing myself with a little bit more support by snaking that shoelace through that last hole here and doing that heel lockdown tying method. That's something that I've done with other shoes that haven't had that stability here. Something to note that if you are someone who wants a staple shoe, in particular around your ankles, this is seemingly lacking here. It is not an overly narrow shoe here, but it is a tiny bit more narrow than its counterpart, its distant cousin that just came out when this did, the Mega Blast. That one was a little bit wider here, but this one's definitely a little bit more narrow, but not something that I would personally think would bother me in terms of stability from this component. I do sometimes find those more narrow shoes will be an issue for me when I'm running. I will be a little bit more flimsy here. My biggest concern, like I said, is going to be in the ankles here. The laces are pretty standard lace. They are not that serrated, tooth lacing, so very average, normal lace. All right, without further ado, let's go and take these for a run. And then I will share you my final thoughts and how I actually would rank these shoes and if I'd recommend them for you, and also what would I recommend them for. And then of course, have to end it with, are they a Thunderstruck shoe? Time will tell. Let's get to it. All right, guys, I'm back fresh off my run. I did end up doing 5 miles in these shoes. So I'm ready to give you the rundown of how these shoes performed, what are my final thoughts, and would I recommend or would I not. This shoe, stepping into it, I felt like it had a pretty snug fit overall. It was very comfortable actually on my foot. I definitely noticed the foam combinations being a teeny bit softer than the Mega Blast, so I did enjoy that. I would say if you are sort of in between sizes, I would recommend half a size up. I'm a pretty solid true to size 7, and I did feel like this was almost a tad too snug for me. I don't like to size up unless I absolutely have to, just because I feel like every time I do size up, it does create a lot more wiggle room than I would prefer when running. I do like to be locked in. I just don't want to have an increase of potential rubbing, discomfort, and potentially leading to longer lasting issues from that. Fabric is pretty forgiving, so I didn't have a ton of issues with rubbing, but again, if your feet are a little bit wider or you're in between sizes, you may want to consider going up half of a size just as a safety precaution. Before I went on that run, I did say that I was worried about some of that stability against, like you can squeeze that in pretty solid here. I actually did not have any issues with that. Now, I chose to not do that heel lockdown with the last lace hole there. I said I was going to potentially do that, but then I kind of wanted to see how these would perform without adding that additional stability component. And I was impressed. I didn't feel like there were any stability issues. When I did increase my speed, I maybe noticed a tiny bit of vulnerability there, but nothing that was substantial or compromising my overall form or performance. One thing that I am very surprised with was that I did not anticipate this was going to cause any rubbing. It's got a pretty good amount of cushion. I think there's just a little bit of that overall design of how the heel collar is. I did notice that my left Achilles was starting to have some blistering beginning towards the end of that 5 miles. Now, I didn't notice that for the first probably 4 miles. That final mile was when I was starting to notice some rubbing. And again, this can vary person to person. This often is an issue just depending on what your striking pattern looks like. So I can see this becoming a shoe that could compromise a little bit if you are more prone to that rubbing and irritation. Just want to give that information to you, as I have had that be a negative impact with New Balance Rebel 4s and then the New Balance Super Complete 4s. Both of those, just the only drawback for both of those shoes was that heel collar here. My pace range for these shoes during this run was anywhere from an 8:30-ish all the way up to about 7:25. I did stick around my race pace for a majority of the run, which is around a 7:40. And I thought that these shoes did a really good job performing at all those paces. I kind of anticipated with that double F turbo squared foam that maybe we were going to function a little bit better at the faster paces versus some of the slower ones. With the Mega Blast, I didn't feel like it was super welcoming at those slower paces, but this one I didn't have any issues. I was actually pleasantly surprised with the performance at some of those slower paces. I think it does come to life a little bit more as you pick up the pace, but a lot of these faster shoes do just naturally. Combination of the foam mechanics and the plate too. I think that definitely really propels you forward. And again, you go fast pretty naturally with these. This is a really solid shoe. And I think that it hit the nail on the head with describing it as an interval daily trainer. I think that this can do a little bit of everything. It can take it through some of those fast speeds, but can also bring it back down to your stable kind of easygoing runs. I mean, I wouldn't say this is a recovery shoe by any means. So if you're looking for something that you can just take out and just kind of putz around, probably not for you. I think that it just foam wise, plate wise, it's not really what you're looking for. How does this compare to the Endorphin Speed 4? So I'm going to use the Speed 4 as a quick little comparison here, just because that was one of my favorite shoes before jumping into some different varieties of plated shoes. So I brought my old trusty Steed out of retirement here, and I just wanted to kind of show you these side by side. I know that they obviously have quite a bit of a difference in terms of their initial looks here. There is a lot less foam on the forefoot here than there is in the Sonicblast. The Endorphin Speed 4 was a lot lighter, and that is something that does really stand out to me. I did find this to be a tiny bit too heavy on my run. It's not a problem, I would say. And someone who's not overly sensitive to weight for their shoes, it's not going to bother you. I wouldn't say this is make or break at all, but this for me was a lot more enjoyable in terms of that weight. This shoe has a lot more flex in the forefoot here. I was assuming that would be something that would make this one a little bit more firm for me, but I did find that this did have overall more comfort in the forefoot. So I think that honestly just having more foam naturally throughout that forefoot here is making that improvement compared to the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. Breathability wise, this was solid. I wouldn't say that there's any bells and whistles to it. I do feel like this ran a tiny bit hotter than this one. Obviously, as you can see, this is pretty breathable here. There are quite a bit of holes going on there. Now time to rank this. Overall quality, I would give this an 8.1. I feel like the quality of the shoe overall is pretty solid. The foam composition hit the nail on the head. I think combining that squared foam with the FF Blast Max was a good decision, just because I feel like it took out a little bit of that bounce that was pretty excessive in the Mega Blast and let this one be a teeny bit more comfortable during the run. So that is something that I did enjoy there. The reason I didn't score it much higher than an 8.1 simply was due to the fact that I feel like the heel collar could have some improvement. I do like to make sure I have a shoe that is not going to cause issues if I do take it out for longer runs. So that is why we came in at 8.1. Performance. I'm going to go ahead and give this a 9.2. So that is a higher ranking for performance, but this is a combination of primarily what it said it could do or would do and how it actually ended up performing for me. And it was spot on. It did do really well with interval training. It would be something I would consider a solid everyday running shoe. The plate wasn't too aggressive, and that's pretty standard with a non-carbon plated plate. That's kind of the point of it, is allowing you to be able to kind of use it a little bit more frequently without some of the rigidity, I think that's the right word, that carbon plates have that really prevent you from being able to just go on and use those on repeat. Comfort, I would say in terms of the run overall, this is probably at an 8.3. I did find this to be a relatively comfortable shoe. Once I started to pick up the pace, I didn't have any issues where I was really feeling the ground. I feel like the foam did its part, absorbing some of that shock. Once I stepped into the shoe, I did find it to be pretty comfortable. I felt that it was not squishy sink-in, which I anticipated with just that combination of the foam makeup. Overall, I felt like it's something that I could take for miles and miles and not have any issues. Aside from that heel rubbing, that would be my only kind of docking it in terms of comfort. It formed to my foot very nicely, fit pretty much like a glove. It was, again, mostly true to size, again, airing out a little bit of the smaller size there, but for me and my feet, it worked. Price. So we came in at $180 US, as I said earlier, and for this type of shoe, I would say that's pretty spot on. It's not that far off from some of its competitors. Like I said, the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5 that's out now, that's at $175, so this is $5 more. Nothing that's that substantial that would cause any red flags or alarms. And that's who I'm comparing it to today. I would say based on that, the price point, I would give this an 8.8. I still feel like I can't necessarily, it's far enough away from a super shoe in terms of price point, so that's where I'm trying to give it some slack here. But when I think of some of our kind of go-to daily trainer shoes, and that's what this is supposed to overall be for, those are really kind of anywhere from, depending on the shoe company, make, model, whatever, 130 to like 170 is kind of the range from what I've been seeing for a lot of different companies. So this being above that, I don't think it's unreasonable. I just would say that, so for its competitors, it's not too far off, being that it has that plate there. And that's what I'm saying in terms of closest competitors, but use case being everyday trainer, that's where it gets a little bit gray. Would think it could come back a teeny bit. Is the Sonicblast a Thunderstruck worthy shoe? And the answer is yes. I do really like this shoe. I had fun in it. I felt that my run was pretty easy overall. It flew by. And I feel like they did a great job with the makeup of this shoe and the description of it too, most importantly, because there's nothing worse than reading up on a shoe and having kind of your anticipated performance. Sometimes I have wishful thinking that's in my own head, and then it doesn't end up panning out to be that, but this did its job. I had a lot of fun with this and would consider this to be a rotation killer for a lot of people. Well, that sums up everything. I hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit more about Sonicblast, what my thoughts were, and if this would be a good fit for you. Check it out. Let me know if you try it and what your thoughts are. Until next time, see you soon.